Before we begin, tap like, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us uncover the darkest corners of the prison system. Now, let's step inside. Most prisons are designed to punish. Some are designed to rehabilitate. But there is one prison in America that was built for something else entirely. This is Angola, a massive prison farm where men are sent not just to serve time, but to disappear into a system where release is almost unheard of. A place where life sentences are the rule, not the exception, where generations of inmates have lived, aged, and died behind the same gates. In this documentary, we're going inside America's prison farm to understand why inmates are sent here and why most never leave. What Angola really is Angola Prison is not just another correctional facility. It is a system within a system, one that operates on a scale, history, and permanence unlike anywhere else in the United States. Officially known as the Louisiana State Penitentiary, Angola sits on more than 18,000 acres of land along the Mississippi River. That makes it the largest maximum security prison in America, larger than many small towns. From the air, it does not look like a prison at all. It looks like farmland, fields stretching the horizon, divided by dirt roads, fences, and guard towers placed miles apart. This design is not accidental. Angola was never meant to feel temporary. The prison is named after the African country Angola, a reference to the enslaved people who were forced to work this land during the 18th and 19th centuries. Long before it became a prison, this property functioned as a plantation, and many historians argue that the structure of Angola never fully escaped that origin. Control, labor, isolation, and permanence were built into the land itself. Today, Angola houses over 6,000 inmates, the vast majority of whom will never be released. More than 70% of the prison population is serving life sentences or extremely long terms, many without the possibility of parole. For these men, Angola is not a stop along the way. It is the final destination. Unlike most prisons, Angola is geographically isolated. It is surrounded on 3 sides by the Mississippi River and bordered on the 4th by remote rural land. There are no nearby cities, no public transportation routes, and very limited civilian presence. Once an inmate enters Angola, the outside world becomes distant, not just physically, but psychologically. This isolation is one of Angola's most powerful control mechanisms. Transfers into Angola often mark a turning point in an inmate's life. For many, it follows a conviction for violent crimes such as murder, armed robbery, or repeat felony offenses. Others arrive after accumulating disciplinary records in other facilities, deemed too difficult or dangerous to manage elsewhere. Angola is where Louisiana sends inmates it considers permanent problems. But Angola is not chaotic. In fact, it is highly structured. The prison operates almost like a self-contained society. Inmates work across the grounds, farming crops, raising livestock, repairing infrastructure, and maintaining the very institution that confines them. Fields are planted and harvested. Roads are repaired. Buildings are maintained. Much of the labor that keeps Angola functioning comes from the inmates themselves. This labor system is often described as work programs, but critics argue reflects something far older, a continuation of forced labor under a different legal name. While participation is technically voluntary in some cases, refusal can carry consequences, including loss of privileges or disciplinary action. For inmates serving life sentences, work becomes routine rather than rehabilitation. When release is not a realistic outcome, the purpose of labor shifts. It is no longer about preparing for freedom. It is about maintaining order inside a system designed to last a lifetime. Angola is also known for its internal hierarchy. With so many inmates serving decades behind bars, long-term power structures form. Respect is earned through time served, reputation, and adherence to unspoken rules. New arrivals quickly learn that survival in Angola depends on understanding this internal order as much as following official regulations. Violence exists, but it is not constant chaos. Angola's control relies more on predictability than fear. Schedules are rigid. Movements are tracked. Routine governs daily life. This stability is intentional. When inmates know exactly what tomorrow will look like, and the next 10 years after that, resistance becomes less likely. Perhaps the most defining aspect of Angola is this. Almost no one plans for release. Unlike other prisons where inmates count down days or years, Angola inmates count decades if they count all. Many arrive in their 20s or 30s and spend the rest of their lives on the same land. Some die there. Others are buried in the prison cemetery, just steps away from where they lived and worked. Angola is not built around hope. It is built around permanence. And once you understand that Angola is designed not as a temporary institution, but as an endpoint, the question becomes unavoidable. Why does this prison exist in this form? And what happens to the men who enter knowing they will likely never leave? That is where this story truly begins. How inmates end up at Angola Inmates do not arrive at Angola by accident. This prison is not a place you stumble into. It is a destination chosen deliberately by the Louisiana justice system. For most inmates, the path to Angola begins long before the prison gates ever come into view. It starts in parish jails, courtrooms, and sentencing hearings where decisions are made that permanently shape the rest of a person's life. Angola primarily receives inmates convicted of the most serious crimes under Louisiana law. These include first-degree murder, second-degree murder, aggravated rape, armed robbery, and repeat violent felony offenses. Louisiana is one of the states with the highest use of life without parole, and Angola is where those sentences are most often carried out. Once a life sentence is imposed, there is usually no expectation of transfer back out. After sentencing, inmates are processed through intake facilities operated by the Louisiana Department of Public Safety and Corrections. At this stage, officials assess criminal history, behavior, gang affiliations, mental health records, and perceived security risk. For inmates flagged as long-term or permanent custody cases, Angola is often identified early as the final placement. Some inmates arrive at Angola immediately after sentencing. Others are transferred there years later. Transfers into Angola also occur when inmates already serving time elsewhere are deemed unmanageable. Repeated disciplinary violations, violent behavior towards staff or other inmates, or involvement in organized prison gangs can trigger reassignment. When other facilities fail to contain an inmate safely, Angola becomes a fallback option. Once that decision is made, it is rarely reversed. The physical transfer to Angola is tightly controlled. Inmates are moved under armed escort, often in prison transport buses or vans with limited visibility and restraints in place. The journey itself can take hours, passing through rural Louisiana and gradually leaving populated areas behind. For many inmates, this trip marks the moment when hope of relocation or release fades. Arrival at Angola is not dramatic, it is procedural. New inmates are processed, photographed, searched, and issued institutional clothing. Personal property is restricted. Contact with the outside world becomes more limited. Phone access, visitation schedules, and movement permissions are tightly regulated from the start. But the psychological impact of arrival is immediate. Angola's scale becomes clear as soon as inmates step inside. Unlike compact urban prisons, Angola stretches endlessly in every direction. The distance between housing units, work camps, and security checkpoints reinforces a sense of isolation. Escape is not just unlikely, it feels impossible. For inmates serving life without parole, this realization is devastating. At many prisons, inmates talk about transfer opportunities, parole hearings, or sentence reductions. At Angola, those conversations fade quickly. Veteran inmates make it clear this is where sentences end, not where they move forward. Angola's population is older than most U.S. prisons. Decades-long sentences mean inmates age inside the system. Chronic illness, disability, and mental health decline are common. Medical care exists, but it is constrained by the reality that this is not a hospital. It is a prison built to hold people until death. Some inmates attempt appeals or clemency petitions, but success rates are extremely low. Louisiana grants parole to only a small fraction of lifers, and even fewer leave Angola alive. Over time, many inmates stop filing paperwork altogether. The system teaches them that effort rarely changes outcomes. What makes Angola unique is not just who arrives, but what happens after arrival. Once assigned, inmates are integrated into work details, housing units, and internal social structures that are designed to function indefinitely. There is no long-term exit planning, no structured reintegration path, and little incentive to prepare inmates for a life outside the fence. For most, Angola is not a phase. It is the end of the road. And as inmates begin to settle into this reality, a new question emerges, one that defines daily life inside Angola. How do you survive when your sentence has no finish line? That answer lies in how Angola controls time, labor, and human behavior. And that is what we explore next. Life without a finish line at Angola Prison. Time works differently. In most prisons, inmates measure time in dates, parole hearings, release windows, sentence reductions. Even long sentences usually come with a point in the future when something changes. At Angola, for most inmates, that moment never comes. A life sentence at Angola is exactly what it sounds like. For inmates serving life without parole, there's no countdown, no milestone, no realistic expectation of freedom. Days blend into years, and years turn into decades with almost no variation. The absence of an end date fundamentally changes how people think, behave, and survive. Daily life at Angola is built around routine. Inmates wake early, often before sunrise. Count is taken. Breakfast is served. Work assignments begin shortly afterward. Many inmates spend their days working in the fields, tending crops, raising livestock, repairing fences, or maintaining buildings. Others work in kitchens, workshops, or maintenance crews. These jobs are not temporary assignments. Many inmates perform the same work for decades. The workday provides structure, but it also reinforces permanence. When you are farming the same land year after year, knowing you will never leave it, work becomes less about productivity and more about endurance. Some inmates embrace routine as a survival strategy. Others emotionally detach, doing only what is required to avoid punishment. Refusing to work is rarely an option. While Angola officially describes its labor system as voluntary, inmates understand the consequences of non-participation. Loss of privileges, disciplinary write-ups, and restricted movement can quickly follow. For inmates with nothing left to gain, avoiding punishment becomes a primary motivation. Housing units at Angola vary, but overcrowding and aging infrastructure are common challenges. Many buildings date back decades, and conditions can be harsh. Extreme heat in summer, limited climate control, and minimal privacy. Cells are small. Personal space is scarce. Noise is constant. Yet the most difficult aspect of life at Angola is not physical discomfort. It is psychological erosion. Long-term confinement without hope reshapes identity. Inmates begin to define themselves not by who they were, but by who they are allowed to be inside the prison. Outside relationships weaken over time. Families stop visiting. Friends move on. Entire lives happen beyond the fence, unseen. For older inmates, Angola becomes a place of decline. As the prison population ages, mobility decreases. Chronic illnesses increase. Some inmates require canes, wheelchairs, or medical assistance just to move across the compound. Angola has hospice and medical units, but they operate within the constraints of a correctional environment. Many inmates die inside Angola. Some pass away in infirmaries. Others die quietly in their cells. A number are buried in the prison cemetery, rows of simple markers, often identified only by numbers. For inmates with no surviving family or unclaimed remains, Angola becomes their final resting place. Despite this, life does not stop. Inmates form routines, friendships, and informal support systems. Religion plays a significant role for many, offering structure and meaning where the system offers none. Programs like prison ministries, limited educational opportunities, and religious events provide brief breaks from monotony. But even these moments are temporary. The reality of Angola always returns. Tomorrow will look exactly like today. Over time, many inmates stop thinking about freedom altogether. Hope becomes painful when it has nowhere to go. Survival shifts from planning for the future to managing the present. One day, one meal, one work detail at a time. This is how Angola maintains control, not through constant force, but through predictability, routine, and the slow acceptance of permanence. When inmates believe nothing will change, resistance fades. Compliance becomes the easiest path. Yet within this controlled environment, power still exists, and it does not always come from the administration. Because when people are locked together for life, unofficial systems emerge. Hierarchies form. Influence spreads, and survival begins to depend not just on rules, but on relationships. That hidden structure inside Angola shapes everything, from safety to status to survival. And that is what we examine next. The unseen power structure inside Angola. Authority does not belong to just one group. On paper, control is absolute. Correctional officers enforce rules, schedules, and discipline. Surveillance is constant. Movement is monitored. The system appears airtight. But beneath the official structure exists another layer of control. One that is never written down, yet deeply understood by everyone inside. This is the inmate hierarchy. Because so many men in Angola are serving life sentences, the prison develops long-term social systems that do not reset every few years. Inmates are not cycling in and out. They are staying. That permanence allows informal power structures to solidify over decades. Respect in Angola is earned slowly. It is built through time served, reputation, and adherence to unwritten rules. Inmates who have survived 20, 30, or 40 years inside the prison command authority without ever needing to demand it. New arrivals are expected to observe, listen, and learn before speaking or acting. Violating these unwritten rules can carry consequences, sometimes more immediate than official discipline. Angola is not governed by constant violence, but violence is always a possibility. Most inmates understand that staying out of trouble requires awareness. Who you associate with matters. Where you sit, where you walk, and how you speak all carry meaning. A single mistake can escalate quickly in an environment where grudges last decades. Gang influence exists, but it functions differently than in short-term facilities. Because inmates are not preparing for release, long-term survival becomes more important than short-term dominance. Open conflict disrupts routine, invites lockdowns, and attracts attention from staff. Outcomes that benefit no one. As a result, power often expresses itself quietly, through favors, protection, access to work assignments, or influence over informal economies. These informal systems coexist with official authority. Correctional officers are aware that inmate hierarchies exist, but they rarely attempt to dismantle them entirely. In some cases, maintaining order means allowing certain internal dynamics to operate, as long as violence remains controlled and routines continue uninterrupted. This balance is delicate. Too much control breeds rebellion. Too little invites chaos. Angola maintains stability by enforcing rules while allowing inmate culture to regulate itself within limits. Over time, this creates a prison that appears calm on the surface, even as tension simmers beneath. New inmates learn quickly that survival depends on understanding this balance. Those who ignore social boundaries often find themselves isolated, disciplined, or targeted. Those who observe, adapt, and remain neutral tend to last longer. In a prison where sentences have no end, longevity becomes a form of success. Trust is rare in Angola. Friendships form, but cautiously. Everyone knows that people change under pressure, and desperation can surface without warning. Many inmates keep emotional distance as a defense mechanism. Caring too deeply can become a liability when loss is inevitable. Religion, work crews, and shared routines often replace traditional friendships. These structures offer predictability without requiring vulnerability. For inmates who expect to die inside the prison, emotional self-preservation becomes essential. Yet even within this rigid environment, moments of humanity exist. Older inmates mentor younger ones. Informal teaching happens in workshops and fields. Stories are passed down about the prison's past, about riots, escapes, and changes over time. Angola has a memory, and inmates are its keepers. But that memory also carries a warning. Everyone knows that Angola has seen violence before. Its history includes decades when control broke down entirely. The current stability is not accidental. It is a result of harsh lessons learned over time. And the system remembers those lessons well. Because when Angola's balance fails, the response is swift, severe, and lasting. Understanding that response, how Angola enforces order when challenged, reveals the final reason why inmates rarely leave. And that is where the story turns next. Why most inmates never leave Angola Prison was not built with release in mind. Every part of the system, from sentencing to daily operations, reinforces the idea that inmates are meant to stay. Unlike prisons designed around rehabilitation or reentry, Angola functions as an endpoint, a place where the justice system's most permanent decisions are carried out. The primary reason inmates never leave Angola is legal, not physical. Louisiana has one of the highest rates of life without parole in the United States. For decades, judges issued life sentences as mandatory punishment for certain crimes, especially murder. Once imposed, these sentences offered no parole hearings, no early release, and no automatic review. Angola became the place where those sentences were enforced. For inmates serving life without parole, the doors close the moment they arrive. Even for those not sentenced to life, the path out of Angola is extremely narrow. Long sentences, strict disciplinary standards, and limited transfer opportunities mean that very few inmates qualify for relocation to lower security facilities. Good behavior alone is rarely enough. Time served must align with policy, availability, and administrative approval, all of which move slowly. Clemency and commutation exist in theory, but in practice, they are rare. Petitions must pass through multiple levels of review, including prison administration, legal offices, and the governor's authority. Most applications are denied without explanation. Years can pass between submissions. For many inmates, repeated rejection leads to resignation. The system teaches patience, then teaches that patience will not be rewarded. Medical release is another possibility, but it is tightly restricted. Inmates must be gravely ill, pose no security risk, and meet strict criteria. Even then, approvals are inconsistent. Some inmates die while their requests are still under review. Transfers out of Angola do happen, but they are uncommon and highly controlled. When they occur, it is often for medical reasons, court appearances, or temporary reassignments. Permanent transfers to lower security prisons are rare, especially for inmates with violent convictions or long disciplinary histories. The reality is simple. Angola is where Louisiana sends inmates it does not expect a release. This permanence affects every aspect of life inside the prison. Programs are limited. Education opportunities exist, but they do not lead to employment outside the system. Vocational training prepares inmates to maintain the prison, not reintegrate into society. Hope becomes dangerous. In environments where hope has no outlet, it can turn into frustration, depression, or violence. Angola manages this by limiting expectations. Inmates are told, directly or indirectly, not to plan for release. Instead, they are encouraged to accept routine, structure, and compliance. Over time, many do. Angola's cemetery stands as quiet evidence of this system. Simple markers line the ground, bearing inmate numbers instead of names. For men who entered young and never left, the prison becomes both their home and their grave. This is not accidental. It is a result of policy, history, and design working together. Angola is not a failure of the justice system. It is a reflection of it, a place built to enforce society's harshest sentences without compromise, a prison designed to last longer than the lives it contains. And yet, despite its permanence, Angola continues to operate in public view, visited by officials, documented by journalists, and discussed in courtrooms, without fundamentally changing its purpose. Which raises a final question. If Angola is working exactly as it was designed, what does that say about the system that created it? That answer brings us to the end of this story. Angola Prison is not hidden. It is not secret. And it is not accidental. It exists in plain sight, operating exactly as it was designed to operate. A place built to enforce society's most permanent decisions, where sentences are not measured in years, but in lifetimes. For the men inside Angola, the system does not promise redemption or release. It promises order, routine, and endurance. Life continues behind the gates, but always within boundaries that were never meant to open again. This documentary wasn't about shock or spectacle. It was about understanding how a prison becomes an endpoint and how a justice system defines punishment when it removes the possibility of return. Angola raises difficult questions, not just about crime and punishment, but about permanence, accountability, and what it means to sentence someone to disappear into a system that outlives them. And those questions don't end at the prison gates. They belong to all of us. Thanks for watching. If you found this documentary informative, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more in-depth, fully researched crime documentaries. Your support helps keep these stories alive, and we'll see you in the next one.